Good morning. Glad to have you here with us today, or with me, not with us, I guess. Um, Starting off our week here in the Psalms together. I hope, again, this has been an encouragement to you and a help to you. And maybe one of the other things I hope is that it's kind of changed a little bit of your, and will as we continue through, a little bit of your understanding and opinion of what the Book of Psalms is. And again, I've mentioned earlier times, imprecatory psalms. There are psalms that just come down, God break their jaw, knock out their teeth. Not quite, I think most people kind of have a picture that all 100, probably most people don't realize there's 150 psalms there, but I think most people think they all sound like the 23rd Psalm, and they don't. And they weren't all written by David. They're not all songs. Some of them are prayers, and some of them are prophetic. Some of the Psalms point towards Christ. And so there's a lot more to the book of Psalms than most people really ever understand. One of the most enjoyable and miserable classes I ever had in seminary was on the Psalms. The material was amazing. The professor was monotone and would just, I'm sorry, just make you want to jab your ears, but the material was great, and so I hope I'm not monotone. I hope I'm keeping it interesting, and I hope you're learning the Psalms as well. So let's go back into that 18th Psalm where we've been now for a week, and we're going to pick back up. And again, this is just a marvelous, marvelous psalm. It is David again. I believe at the end of his life, looking back over all that God had done for him and all his blessings and provisions, and this is a song of praise as David considered his life. And so we're going to pick up today in the 28th verse, and there David says this. And before I started the camera, I saw this and had to wait a second because I just kind of got to laughing a little bit. I like this phrase. David says, "For thou wilt light my candle. The Lord my God will enlighten my darkness." Now, again, that phrase just tickles me a little bit. That David says, "Thou wilt light my candle." Again, I think the way I'm joking and laughing about it is not quite the way David intended it, but I think that's a good phrase. I hope God has lit your candle. I hope He lights your candle today, and then fans the fire. And so, as what David was talking about, though, I think is that again, I believe. And I think when you believe David wrote this psalm, has a lot to do with how you understand this psalm. And for me, again, I believe that David was writing this much later in life, and looking back at the provisions and the things that God had done for him, and when he did, and he did look back onto his life, and he says that God has lights my candle, He enlightens my darkness. I think what David is saying here, in really in the next 17, 18 verses, he's going to elaborate on this thought. But I think what David is saying is, again, as he got to the end of life and he looked back, he realized and recognized that God had provided him with everything and anything that he could have possibly needed, that God had been guiding him, and God had been protecting him, and God had been strengthening him throughout his life. that he'd given him all the things that he needed, all the supplies, resources, energy, that everything that he needed. I think, again, that statement when David says, the Lord, my God, will enlighten my darkness. David, I think what he says there is that there's been some dark days. There have been some days in my journey that they were dark, that I didn't know what I was going to do, which way I was going to turn. I didn't know how they were going to work out. But as now that I'm through them, and I look back, I realize that in every situation, in every battle I have found myself in, that my God has been sufficient. And I hope that wherever you are in your station in life, young or old, that even now you can look back and have that same understanding of life. Yeah, there's been some valleys. David, the 23rd Psalm writes about valleys. There have been some valleys, and there have been some darkness, but in all those situations, again, however old you are, wherever you've been, and everyone listening here this morning, watching, has had a different course, different experience. But my prayer is that as you sit here and you look back, you understand and realize, there were some dark days, but God always lit my candle, that he always has provided. And so the first thing that I want us to look at here as we think about what David is saying here is the wisdom that God had provided for David. I think one of the things that he's talking about there again is he says, "The Lord my God will enlighten my darkness." And so, what David, I believe, is saying to us is that in the darkest hours was when I saw God the clearest. When it was the darkest, when Saul was hot on my heels, when Absalom rebelled, when he was when my own son was trying to get me. That's when I saw God the absolute clearest. And one of the things I think you'll learn, that I think all of us learn if you live long enough, if you serve God long enough, is that we see God the clearest in the darkest times. Again, it's not that God is any more present. It's not that He is any more powerful. But it very simply is, I think we look a little harder when it's dark, when the things are going bad. That God will light our candle, even in the darkness. He does that sometimes through His Word. A friend of mine from many years ago. In fact, I haven't seen him in many years. He's moved away now. But when he was born, his mother passed away in childbirth. And then when he was about 16 years old, his father took his own life. And my friend was the one who walked in and found his father. And he sat down and began to read the Bible after that event. And eventually he just opened and started reading in the Psalms. And finally came to the Psalm that says, "When my father and mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up." Now, that psalm is not talking about your parents forsaking you, and or his parents didn't forsake him in the same way as that psalm, but still God spoke to him in that dark hour through His Word, and quote, lit his candle. He filled up his lamp with oil and lit his candle. And he learned in that time when things don't make sense, when things there's no rhyme or reason to what's going on in our life, that God will always be there and enlighten our darkness when we can't see anything else. David says that God will be able to give us light. And look what he says in verse 23 or 29, excuse me. For by thee I have run through a troop, and by my God have I leaped over a wall. Do you see what David is saying there? David said, even though it was dark, I was able to run through the enemy. I was able to leap over a wall. What he's saying is, was even in the darkness of his situation, God enabled him, and he enlightened his darkness and allowed him to be able to overcome every situation and every roadblock and every problem that had been thrown his way. This morning, as we consider those two verses, I don't know again how we ended up, this whole time scale of how this has worked out, why it is here on this day we're looking at these two verses, and I don't know why today of all days you chose to watch and to hear what was being said. Other than to tell you, I believe God is trying to speak to someone this morning and let you know that even though right now it appears very dark, that God is still there. He still cares, and He can still and will still light your candle, enlighten your darkness, and allow you and help you to be able to overcome the struggles and the obstacles and the roadblocks that life throws your way. I hope that helps you today. I hope that you'll allow God to be the light under your feet, a lamp under your path. I hope you'll allow Him and His Word to encourage you, to strengthen you, and to give you hope and light for whatever darkness it is that you're up against. Have a great day. Have a wonderful day. And like David, allow God to light your candle so you can run through a troop and leap over a wall. Have a wonderful day today, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning.